went to the library here this week, the Tumwater Library, to get my library card. I haven't gotten a library card since I was like 8. You guys want to see it? Yeah. Yeah, I felt like I've arrived as a person. So the libraries have gotten really fancy nowadays. I don't even have to use people to go check out my books. A machine does it for me. They actually let you touch them. I mean, it's mind-blowing. And so I went to the library, and I got you guys remember the Choose Your Own Adventure books? Maybe some of you do. So as a kid, I loved the Choose Your Own Adventure books. And I would go to the library about once every week or every other week, and I would read and check out as many Choose Your Own Adventure books as I could. I don't know why. But I had this really cool system of how to optimize my adventure to the best I could. Because the Choose Your Own Adventure book, what it is really, I mean, if a book is only, like, this book is 180 pages. Really, the real story of a Choose Your Own Adventure book is probably only 50 pages long. But what they do is they give you all these alternate endings and all these different ways. And so they're like, oh, you're going to a swamp. You see the swamp. Do you use the rope to swing across the swamp? Or do you ride your horse, like in the never-ending story, across the swamp? And you're like, I'm going to swing across it with the rope. So they're like, turn to page 102. You turn there. And then there'd be a picture of you falling into the swamp and dying. Adventure over. She'd go back to what page you're on, and like, okay, now I'm going to choose bringing my horse, like the never-ending story, and then that's depressing as well. And so what I would do is, I would be reading this book, and I would have my fingers on every single choice that I've made. And then when I ran out of fingers, I started using candy wrappers. So I would go through and I would get to every variation of the story because I was trying to find, the way to make it through the story without dying. And so you'd go, and then as you made your choices and as you figured out what's wrong, you'd slowly eliminate your fingers, and then by the end of the book, you made it! And then I'd read the next book. If you guys have never read one, highly recommend it. I haven't even read this one. I literally walked into the library and said, I need to Choose Your Own Adventure book. This was the only one in the library. I know. So some other kid has checked them all out. Probably doing the same thing I'm doing. See, life is filled with a lot of choices. We get to choose our own adventure. It's really exciting. See, we get to choose what to wear this morning. We get to choose how to talk to people. We get to choose where to work or not to work. We get to choose what to eat, how fast to drive, what team to cheer for in the Super Bowl. We make choices all the time. And we don't have the advantage of being able to really go back, do we? We just pay for the consequences. There is no going back. Ooh, I should not have worn red today. Oh, I shouldn't have worn that today. Definitely should have filled up my car with gas yesterday. That was a bad choice. Oh, I shouldn't have done this, should have done this. We have choices all the time. Life is filled with choices. And as we wrap up our study of the Sermon on the Mount, as Jesus is preaching and teaching to his disciples, he gives us not hundreds of choices, but he gives us 3. 3 critical choices that impact the ending of your life. See, in the Choose Your Own Adventure, you don't know what's going to happen next. You can make a decision that makes perfect sense. But because the author likes to torment kids, that smart choice actually was a bad choice. But what's nice is when Jesus gives us a choice, he tells us what's going to happen at the end. He tells us if this is going to be a successful choice or a bad choice. So if you guys are there, Matthew chapter 7. Matthew chapter 7. We're going to be in verse 13. We're going to start in verse 13 here this morning. And I'm just going to read straight through. about these three choices that Jesus gives us.
I apologize for the technical difficulties. Read through the rest of Matthew 7 to get caught up. Thank you for listening.
And not as the scribes. The first choice he shows us is here in verses 13 and 14. And he tells them, you need to pick the right gate. Enter by the narrow gate. For the gate is wide and the way is easy that leads to destruction. So there's two gates here. And you're heading down this path of life and you come across two paths. You look down one path and it's a little ragged. The doorway at the very end looks pretty small. You don't think you're going to be able to take all your stuff through it. If you can even make it over the treacherous trails. The other path is wide. It's smooth. It smells nice. It's just happy. You guys know what I'm talking about. If you go over to Lacey right now, whoo-wee. Smells like a bunch of rotten mushroom things. Ugh. So which path are you going to choose? And that's the choice here. Jesus is saying, do not pick the wide and easy path. Yes, I know the gate is wide at the end. You'll be able to take all of your stuff in. But what happens is that path leads to destruction. Don't turn that page. Don't choose that adventure. Pick the narrow path. He says if you choose the easy path, it leads to destruction, and many are going that way. So yes, if everyone jumped off the bridge, would you? I hope not. If everyone followed that path, would you join on it as well? And I hope the answer is no. Because if you choose that easy path, what Jesus is promising you, as he says in Mark chapter 9, verse 47 and 48, he says, and if your eye causes you to sin, tear it out. It is better for you to enter the kingdom of God with one eye than two eyes and be thrown into hell. And this is how he describes hell. Where the worm does not die and the fire is not quenched. I want you to think about that imagery. The worm that would eat on you. And have you ever caught I caught a rat here a few months ago, and I left it in there longer than it should have been there? Because I just get sick of crawling under the house. And I'm pretty sure I waited too long because the worms had started to eat it. Let me tell you. But you know what happens, though, is when you get rid of it, they all scatter away. They flew away, but here there's no escape. They don't run away. The worm is there forever. And the fire is never quenched. You can't escape. So yeah, you got to bring all your stuff. And it's going to be on fire. That nice recliner that you bought, have you ever tried sitting on a recliner that is on fire? It sort of loses its reclinability. It doesn't work. And what Jesus is saying, though, is you can't, like I could, where you could have your fingers in there and you marked like 100 places, and I could go back if I messed up. There is no going back from this choice. When you turn the page and you choose the easy path, you are stuck. And at the end of life, when you step through that gate, you can't say, whoa, that looks painful, and you can't turn around. Because those happened your whole life. If you have been choosing poorly, so imagine like this. Have you ever seen like some of those old night movies where somebody's always carrying all the stuff on his back, like Friar Tuck always carried his stuff. They're like, oh, they pretty much become a human ox, a human mule, and they're just carrying around. That's what I picture we're doing. We've got to get all of our stuff. So we accumulate all of this garbage and junk and all these valuables in life, and we try to bring it, and we're bringing it. And what happens is we get to the end of life, and we're walking through this big, easy gate that all of our stuff can fit through, and we fit through it, and then we look down, like, this was bad. And we try to turn back around, and we try to go back up the hill. See, all of life, we've been slowly going down this hill if we've chosen this path. You're not going to be able to bring that stuff up, and you try because you're trying not to choose it. You're trying to backtrack, and you walk back up the hill. And if you're carrying all that stuff on your back, what's going to happen? You're falling in. You're stuck. That's how the easy path works. It draws you in because it's really easy. Walking downhill on a slight slope is a lot easier than running up the hill, isn't it? Going down the stairs is easier than going up the stairs. Going down the ladder is usually easier than going up the ladder. That's what it's doing, is drawing you in. And Jesus says, don't choose that adventure. Pick the right gate. Pick the narrow one. And so let's say you do choose. You're like, yeah, Jesus, I'm trusting you. I'm not going to choose this wide path. You say there's destruction at the end. I'm going to choose the narrow path, and you follow along it. And so that gate is narrow, and you're looking, and you're like, how am I going to get all my stuff in? And you're not going to be able to. And so you slowly get rid of your stuff in your journey, and you realize the stuff of life isn't as important as you thought it was. And you sort of get rid of it, and you're going across the treacherous trail, and you slip, and you accidentally drop it, and there goes your chair. Well, I'm not getting it. And so you have a little less stuff. And by the time you get to the gate, you have nothing. This life has bruised, and you're battered, and you might have a limp, and you're hobbling, and you're like, I made it. And you look at the gate, and it's not very impressive. It's a small, narrow gate, but it's been blood-stained. Looks like something died there. Okay, Jesus said this way's life. And you step through that gate. Squeeze through, because you can't take anything with you. You squeeze through, and you look, and the fields, and the water, it opens up. You've been granted life for the rest of eternity. Which path are you going to choose? Jesus says, don't choose that wide gate, the easy path. Choose to follow me. And that gate that you go through, it has been stained with my blood. And through my blood and my sacrifice, I'll give you life. Choose the narrow gate. Pick the right one. The second one here is in verses 15 through 23. It says, beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. You will recognize them by their fruits. See, in Choose Your Own Adventure books, I mean, goodness, I remember reading a Bumblebee one, like, Transformers Bumblebee, and you were Bumblebee, and I don't know who wrote this, but seriously, like every right choice you made turned out to be a bad one. So you ended up running from like the bad guy and your tire fell off. No idea why, it just did. So you died by a tire falling off. I remember dying in a swamp. I remember dying, oh man, you just die continuously. It's really sort of depressing. I mean, ugh. See, and as we start this book, this journey of life again, there's a second choice we've had to make. Jesus is like, beware of false prophets. See, as we're walking down this journey of life, there are two kinds of teachers, two kinds of prophets. They're sitting along the trail. They're pointing us. One set is pointing us down this wide, narrow path. Guys, this is the easy way. This is it. Everybody else is doing it. Look at that. It's a nice slope down. It smells good. It's perfect. Take this path. And then there's another group. And they usually don't look as, put together as the other side. And like, that path is destruction. At the end of that path is your doom. Don't take it. Take the narrow path, and you have two teachers. And Jesus is like, beware of the false prophets who come to you in sheep clothing. Could you get that imagery? Wolves eat sheep. A wolf is wearing the skin of the sheep it's devoured. But here's the thing, it is so well camouflaged. Sheep are like, there's something about you, but I don't know what it is. Because they're pretty camouflaged. Because sometimes sheep are pretty smart. And sometimes sheep are pretty dumb. And we got to be careful because there are wolves in sheep clothing, and they're not nice, happy wolves. They're ravenous, hungry wolves who want to devour you because they found the sheepskin they previously are wearing is getting a little bit small. They got to eat a plumper sheep. And he uses these imageries of fruits, and he's like, hey, do you get these from this type of thing? Do you get this from this? And so you're looking, do you take apples from rotten, disgusting, gross trees that have thorns? And something's wrong with this plant. Why? You got to be careful. You look at this plant, you're like, man, something is off about the fruit here. You got to inspect the fruit before you eat it. Nikki had this incident of, poor thing, we were at Faith and she bit into a pepper. It had a caterpillar in it. It was a pickled caterpillar, so that made it better. You have to inspect it, and she's like, I saw a little hole. She didn't think anything of it. I mean, we're talking like a teeny hole. I'm glad it's happened to her and not me. I know it sounds terrible. You got to inspect it before you eat it. And so a couple weeks ago, you guys remember we're talking about pronouncing judgments on one another, how we need to be cautious about judging, right? And so someone came up to me and said, well, what about this verse here? You're judging it by the fruit. I'm like, that is a great question. We're going to answer in a few weeks. Because what is Jesus talking about here? He's not talking about just your random neighbor. No, he's like, beware of false prophets. Now, what is a prophet? A prophet is I have the definition. A prophet is a spokesman of God that is bringing God's word to bear on a people. Okay? So someone who is speaking on behalf of God. And this is done either through new revelation or it's done by interpreting and teaching previous revelation, to a new group of people, okay? And so this is what prophets did. He says, beware of false teachers. Beware of false Bible teachers. Beware of false Bible leaders. See, this type of judgment is okay. See, as we look at it, and as we were challenged, we recognize that we all judge. You guys right now, hopefully, are judging what I'm saying. I really hope you do, okay? You think through, okay, is there value in what he is saying? Is what he's saying right or what he's saying is wrong? You guys do this all the time. As soon as you mention the word Donald Trump, you're going to get reactions where you're like, I'm going to evaluate what this person says. And you think through what he's saying and how he's saying, okay. Or any type of politics or any type of religion. Or when someone says, hey, I'm a Mormon, I would like to teach you this. And we're like, okay, I am going to turn on the switch and examine what you're saying and see if it's right or wrong. Jesus is like, we have to examine the fruit of what we are being taught. You have to, because what is at stake is the path you choose. The false teachers want you to get nice and plump on that wide path so they can devour you and destroy you. Or you have the other path. Our souls are at stake with false teachers and false prophets. It's important. We have to have our switch. Now, this is not saying that we now go around to everybody who opens their mouth and pronounce them a false prophet. Whoa, I mean, that could be really comical. Rita comes up, she's like, well, I really feel this. False prophet! I was just asking, false! Banished you wolf in sheep's clothing. I mean, if we did this to each other, could you imagine the environment that we had? Oh, buddy. But what happens is we have to judge those who are leading. You have to look. You have to think through what they're saying. You have to examine the fruit. It's just like, listen, are you guys ever going to listen to poor people about how to get rich? Come on. No. Why? The fruit of their labors is sort of lacking. Nothing against being poor. It's just, I want to get rich, and you're not rich. Just like listening to, I've always found it funny when, might sound a little arrogant here, but when I've listened to coaches who have no soccer experience teach soccer, and they try to teach me soccer, I'm like, oh, I didn't know how to do that. And you're looking at it, you're like, what you're saying makes no sense. You've never played the sport. There is no fruit of your labor. Something is off. It doesn't match. Just like how you wouldn't listen. We do this all the time. Would you listen to someone who is morbidly obese on weight and dieting? Seriously, would you? Say it. Okay. We judge all the time by the fruit. Now, it's nothing against that person. The person might have some good advice at times. But until the fruit verifies you, you're going to hold it with some caution. The same way is true very specifically spiritually. You have to weigh what the person is saying and see if their life backs it up. James chapter 3, verse 1, James says, not many of you should become teachers, my brothers, for you know that we who teach will be judged with greater strictness. Gulp. You're going to be looked at. You're going to be examined. Well, Pastor, last week you said this. Mm-hmm. You're right. I did. It's really hard trying to make sure you've never accidentally contradicted yourself, ever. I think it's really challenging as the leader. It's challenging, and people are constantly looking at your life, making sure that verifies with what you're saying. It's that way because you're following this teacher. You're listening to this prophet. You want to, because as he says in verse 18, a healthy tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a diseased tree bear good fruit. Diseased leaders cannot bear good fruit. You will recognize them by their fruits. And so teachers of the Bible need to be held to a higher standard. And you have to use your thinking caps and your judgmental monitors and make sure that what you're hearing is the value. And what you're hearing matches what the Bible says and fits. And you have to make that your responsibility. Now, I want to offer some cautions here, okay? Some make it their mission to pronounce judgment on all leaders. I mean, they literally go out of their way to find leaders they disagree with just so they can get up somewhere and bash them. But here's what happens. Remember that whole, don't judge lest ye be judged, and that whole thing where as you pronounce judgment, it's going to come back on you? As soon as you make it your mission to be the judger of other leaders in a vocal fashion, you become yourself a spokesman for God. Think about that. And so as soon as you're like, Andy Stanley said this, and he's such a bad guy, and blah, blah, blah. As soon as you pick your guy and you pick your target, and you most of the time will speak out in ignorance, you now become a teacher. And you now are going to be judged a whole lot harder. So sometimes it's worth just keeping our mouth closed. I'll be honest, it is. Because there's a lot of wacky teachers out there, guys. There's a lot. Just turn on the TV to the Christian station, and you will get some wonderful, colorful teaching. Don't do that, okay? Just don't. It's not even. But they do, and they make it their mission. As soon as you become a pronouncer of judgment on leaders, you make yourself a prophet, and now you will be judged as well. There needs to be caution there. That's not saying you got to listen to them and support everybody, but you can just say, I just don't agree with this guy, and I don't listen to him, and move on with your life. It's the easy way to do it. Just move on with your life. Okay, so don't make it your mission to go around and find false teachers to judge. The second thing is you are to evaluate at all times what is going into your mind in any way. And I will be honest, this includes the news you listen to. This includes the radio stations that you listen to. This includes the TV shows. Because people who say that has no effect on me, I'm sorry, it does. It has an effect and it has an impact. We have to keep our brains on. If you just want to veg and watch Netflix, watch a show that you can actually veg on. Like Teletubbies. Okay? We have to keep our minds going. Teletubbies is a horrendous show, guys. It's just like the greatest nonsense in a 22-minute show ever. If you've never seen it, don't. It's like, it's just like a Barney, but just like so much more wacky. Oh boy, they teach you about shapes and colors, and by the end, you don't know if you've learned something or if you're losing memories. Okay. But seriously, you got to evaluate all the time. Or the other one is we have to be cautious at pronouncing our judgment. All right. And I really want to say this. So we have been developing a rapport for like 4 years, okay? I've been here like 4 years and almost 3 months, I think, okay? It's been great. Thank you guys. You guys are wonderful. But we've been developing, and so what happens is when we talk and communicate with one another, I can be a little sarcastic at times. I can have a little edge to me at times, but you guys over time have sort of gotten, okay, this is his humor style. This is just who he is, okay? You get it. Other leaders at other churches have the exact same thing with their congregations. And I have heard people turn it on and find one phrase and that person pull it entirely out of its context and completely banish everything the guy has ever said. Really? Could you imagine what I would be? Oh my word, the things that would be twisted into... Let's not even imagine that, okay? So it's what happens. See, a lot of times we don't understand everything of what's going on, and so we just need to be a little cautious about pronouncing judgment. Okay, we just got to be careful, because sometimes who we pronounce as a false teacher might not be a false teacher. They might just be communicating to a completely different group of people in a different way, and we just don't get it. But it's possible that teacher is completely wrong, and he's false, and you're like, for me, I'm not going to listen to him. Because how I'm taking what he's saying, he's leading me down this path, and I'm not going to do it. We just need to be careful, okay? Don't turn your brains off. Just be careful. Because we're far more ignorant than we like to think we are. This is point 3. So there's the verse, James 3:1. It's a good one. Last one is choose the right foundation. That's in verses 24. Oh, wait. Let's not go back there yet. Okay, so look at 21, okay? So 21 through 23. Now, what's fun about, not fun, but what's interesting about the false teachers here, okay? And this is more illustration that sometimes they can teach in amazing ways and do amazing things, and God seems to be working in their life. If you look at any televangelist or somebody who ministers on TV, if you look at any of that, you know, they're on a TV show. How much cooler can you get? It's pretty cool, guys. Okay, I'm just saying. It's pretty neato. All right? And people are sending them money. And people don't even have to go to church. They can sit on TV and watch. I mean, that's who's arrived. And it can really seem like this person is doing a lot of amazing things. And a lot of amazing fruits happening. And all this great stuff is happening. And Jesus says straight up, not everyone who does my will is going to get to the kingdom of heaven. He says, on that day, many will say to me, Lord, Lord, do we not prophesy in your name? God, I was teaching for you. I was teaching on your behalf. And I even cast out demons for you. I mean, come on, it's a demon. I did that. Not only that, I did all these mighty works in your name. And Jesus is like, you took the easy path. Depart from me. I never knew you. I never knew you. We have to be careful with what we're hearing. We've got to examine the fruits of those who we decide to follow. We've got to be careful. We have to pick the right leaders, people. Now, okay, verse 24. It says, everyone who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who built his house on a rock. And the rains came down and the floods came up. The rains came down and the floods came. You guys know this? Oh, man. You guys are a little, okay? And so you have this house on the rock, and then the other house is on the sand. And what happened to the house on the sand? It goes, Rita, say it louder. There we go. Okay. It goes splat. So you have these two houses. So not only do we have to choose the right adventure, and we have to choose the right leader to follow, we have to choose the right place to live. Man, it's an important thing. So how do you, let's just do this, okay? So he says, everyone who hears these words of mine. So what Jesus has said so far, okay, the Sermon on the Mount, whoever hears this and does them will be like a wise man who built his house on the rock. And that is an established foundation. See, I'm learning about this. See, you guys see this? That's in California. Nice row of condominiums. See, the ground was, they probably all have some foundation. But does it matter when the ground underneath the foundation is being eroded? They're gone. I mean, if you want prime beachfront real estate, now's your time. Just it might not be there next week, okay? There's nothing they can do. You can't build the mountain back up. So you have a choice. Do you build your house on the rock or do you build your house on sand? And whoever listens to the words of Jesus and does them and builds their life around those words, their house will be a firm house on a firm foundation on the rock that is not going to cave in when the storms come in. So just because I feel like it. Guys, stretch your fingers. Okay, so I'm going to teach you guys a song, okay? So, the wise man built his house upon the rock. The wise man built his house upon the rock. The wise man built his house upon the rock. And the house on the rock stood. How do you do firm? Firm! Okay? Okay. And the rains came down and the floods came up. The rains came down and the floods came up. The rains came down and the floods came up. And the house on the rock stood firm. Okay. Okay, so next one, okay? The foolish man built his house upon the sand. The foolish man built his house upon the sand. No, and the house on it goes splat. I don't know. I don't remember that part. Okay. And the rains came down and the floods came. Come on, louder. Thank you. The rains came down and the floods came up and the house on the sand went splat. Okay. You guys got to get out more, okay? That's it. Choose the right house. Choose the right foundation. And Jesus says very plainly, if you choose my path and my way, your footing, your house, your dwelling place is going to be secure. Would you rather live in a condominium that is going to fall off into the ocean or a small little shack that is safe from the elements? That's right. They promise this. They don't tell you about this. They promise you the good life. Yeah, it's good for a little bit. I feel really bad for these people, though, because some of them might actually, it's terrible. I mean, there's been houses where they've lost hundreds of feet. They thought they were just fine. It's sad. So pick the right foundation. When Jesus finished these things, the crowds were astonished at his teaching, for he was teaching them as one who had authority and not as the scribes. Man, what an introduction so far to the teaching of Jesus. The crowds who were sitting outside the disciples listened in. They're like, something is different. And what's really fascinating is Jesus flat out tells them, beware of false teachers, examine them by their fruits. Jesus is inviting them to look at the fruit of his ministry. Jesus is inviting it. Look at the fruit of the ministry. I bring life. See, he began chapter 5 talking about a blessed life and the secret of how it can happen, and how as we base our life on what Jesus Christ is saying and the hope that is in him, as we build it on him, we have a blessed life. And he says here at the end, you have a choice in your own adventure book to pick the right path, to pick the right leader, to pick your right teacher. And as a result, you are picking the right dwelling place. So choose wisely. Choose Jesus Christ who brings life.